If any of your family or friends ask you, "What are you doing this week for your class?" you can give them the exceptionally collegiate answer, "Oh, we're reading Aristotle and Freytag." That's because classes about dramatic writing, whether playwriting or screenwriting, tend to start with a discussion of the lessons we can learn from important theorists such as Aristotle or Freytag. With that in mind, two of our first readings for this semester will be an excerpt from Aristotle's Poetics, which we'll call 6 parts of a drama and 3 parts of a plot, and an excerpt from Freytag's Technique of the Drama, which we'll call 5 parts and 3 crises. What I want to do in this short video is to combine some of the concepts we'll learn about from Aristotle and Freytag into one diagram that offers a practical approach to creating a structure for the plot of your own drama. As you'll read in our excerpt from Aristotle, his analysis of ancient Greek tragedies such as Sophocles' Oedipus the King led him to believe that dramas are composed of 6 parts: plot, character, diction, thought, spectacle, and song. In his judgment, the most important of those 6 parts of a drama is the plot, the term he used to describe the structure of the incidents. And he divided that plot, in turn, into 3 parts that he simply called a beginning, a middle, and an end. That's why discussions about the plots of plays or screenplays are often framed in terms of 3-act structure. Act 1, Act 2, and Act 3 are respectively fancier terms for Aristotle's beginning, middle, and end. So you'll notice I've divided my one diagram into 3 parts. In pink, I've labeled those 3 parts with both Aristotle's ancient terms beginning, middle, and end, as well as with our more modern terms Act 1, Act 2, and Act 3. As you'll read in our excerpt from Freytag, his analysis of more modern plays such as Shakespeare's Hamlet led him to believe that the dramas are composed of 5 parts that he arranged in a pyramidal structure. You'll often see creative writing teachers sketch out this profoundly influential pyramid from Freytag, even if they don't often mention his name. The terms that Freytag used to describe these 5 parts of dramas were introduction, rising action, climax, falling action, and catastrophe. He called the last part catastrophe because he, like Aristotle, was analyzing a lot of tragedies, which do end catastrophically for their protagonists. Nowadays, we tend to label this 5th part of the drama the resolution instead. And we often label the first part as the exposition instead. So you'll notice that in my diagram, I've spread out Freytag's 5 parts of a drama across Aristotle's 3 parts of a plot. In blue, I've labeled Freytag's parts with his term introduction, rising action, climax, falling action, and catastrophe. In purple, I've written out our more modern terms for his introduction and catastrophe, exposition, and resolution. I've also added the term action, which is meant to encompass Freytag's rising action, climax, and falling action. Finally, also in purple, I've written out 5 practical pre-writing questions I would encourage you to consider when you're creating the structure for the plot of your drama. When creating Act 1, you should answer 2 questions. Who is your protagonist, the main character in your drama, and what is your protagonist's dramatic need? That is, what does that character desire? When creating Act 2, you should also answer 2 questions. What conflicts threaten to prevent your protagonist from fulfilling their dramatic need, and what is the dramatic question? A little more explanation is needed for these 2 questions. Those conflicts could take the forms of challenges or obstacles your protagonist must overcome, or the form of an antagonist whom your protagonist must struggle against. A quick way to remember who's who in terms of your protagonist and your antagonist, by the way, is to look at those prefixes pro and anti. We are pro, or for, your protagonist in their agon, in their struggle. We are anti, or against, your antagonist in their agon or struggle. The dramatic question is essentially, will the protagonist fulfill their dramatic need by the end of the drama? Finally, when creating Act 3, you should answer one last question. What is the answer to the dramatic question? All that means essentially is, did the protagonist fulfill their dramatic need at the end of the drama? So, this one diagram is now filled with a lot of parts and a lot of questions to take into consideration when you're attempting to create a structure for the plot of your own drama. There's one more aspect of the diagram that I should explicitly point out, though. Notice that the amount of space that I've devoted to Act 2, or the middle, or the action, is twice as large as the amount of space I've devoted to either Act 1 or Act 3. That's because a useful rule of thumb when creating the structure for the plot of your drama is that Act 2 should take about twice as long as either Act 1 or Act 3. That is, if your goal is to write an approximately 120-minute drama, you might try to write a first act of about 30 minutes, a second act of about 60 minutes, and a third act of about 30 minutes. So this has been my attempt to move us from the conceptual to the practical in terms of what we learned from reading dramatic theorists such as Aristotle and Freytag. This might be a bit too much to share with your friends or family, so remember, if they ask you what you're doing in your college class this week, you can just tell them, oh, we're reading Aristotle and Freytag.